We're going to be today, we are in Perek Zion of Sefer Nechemia. Perek Zion will sound very much like a rerun of an earlier Perek that we encountered in Sefer Ezra, because most of Perek Zion is going to be a census. The census that is going to be the basis of Perek Zion was the census that was taken at the time of the Aliyah of Zerubbabel, the early Aliyah at the first year in Cyrus. So just to give you a quick historical rundown of some years, just to remember, Cyrus was the first of the Persian kings. When Cyrus rose to power, and again, there's all these debates about the precise years, we're going to use the year 538 is the year that he rose to power. The story of Ezra and Nechemia take place during the reign of Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes, according to historians, is about 5 kings down. It's Cyrus, Cambyses, Darius, Xerxes, Artaxerxes, which is Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes, his reign was from 465 BCE to 425 BCE. Ezra arrived in the 7th year of his reign. Nechemia came 13 years later in the 20th year of the reign. So the simple way to give an idea of what we're going to encounter in this perek is that there's going to be a census that we're going to encounter after just a few psukim, based on a census that took place around 538, which was about 100 years earlier, 90 to 100 years earlier. Now, when you take a census, obviously, if you're going to just use the same numbers, it's the same numbers. But when you take a census using the same structures, you normally will expect some differences between what happened 2 generations ago, et cetera, even though we're using the same structures. This sheet, which I passed out, and really we don't have to go through a lot of it, I just want to point out, this sheet has 3 columns in it. The yellow column gives you the numbers based on the 2nd chapter of Ezra. The green column are the numbers that we find in Nechemia. Now, if you notice in Nechemia, just to take the first large number of 25,406, it is 1,250 more than the yellow number of 24,144. Why is there a difference? Pretty simple. People died and people were born. So within this category of the people from Mispar and Shei Yisrael, the number veered a little bit. And you keep on going down the list. And if you look, that there is another large number, which is a total not above the red numbers, which is 31,089. For those of you who are online, I'm going to pull up that screen just so you see it as well. Okay, in that number, if you look here, you'll see 31,089 is in the green. And then you'll see in the yellow was 29,818. Again, over the 90 years, the population didn't grow very much. The unusual piece, by the way, is that the total number remained exactly the same. How that happens and what happens, we really don't have a good answer. We don't have a good answer for it. They don't come to those numbers. We're missing some numbers, and we'll see where that comes from. We talked about it also back in Ezra. Well, they come close. They're not exactly the same. When we talk about 600,000 Jews, 603, 605. Now, the blue column is from the Apocrypha, the book of Ezra that we don't have within our Tanakh, where they also have this repetition of the census. And again, you see a difference in numbers. You just have those 3 sets of numbers. We're going to encounter this. And the reason why I'm just showing this to you is for 2 purposes. One is we will see there are differences. On the back of this page, for those of you who are here, and for those of you who are online, it is a separate page Okay, there's also a number of other changes, so a little bit of some textual changes. This is actually a list of every single change between the census that was taken in the second parak of Ezra and the census now in the seventh parak, both the numbers and how names are added or missing or how they're changed. It is, if you want to spend a lot of time, you can, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. There are differences between the two. Just a couple more facts, okay? And the couple more facts of the puzzle, and this is what Margaret was referring to earlier. When you look at the numbers, and you see in these numbers that 29,818 doesn't actually add up to 42,360, and 31,089 doesn't add up to 42,360. And so how do you get those missing 11, 12,000 people? Where do they come from? And there are different theories. We'll address it a little bit later. The simplest answer of them are that there are people who are not included in the census, either because they came from the other tribes, the 10 tribes, or they may have been people who never left. And we're still in Eretz Yisrael. And so that's how we get to the total population. And we're just counting in this census those who came back from the diaspora. That's step one. Now, the other piece of the puzzle. Well, so the issue is when you're counting, if the purpose of the census is to count, let me give a simple answer. If your purpose of census is to count the residents of the city of Chicago, and you're not counting the residents of Milwaukee, well, that makes total sense because your purpose is to count the residents of Chicago. If you just want to know how many people came back from the Gola, how many people were the diaspora Jews who came back, but then we want to say, what's the total Jewish population? It's a legitimate kind of action, right? There's not a real issue with it. We don't know for sure all of the details. We do know this discrepancy, and the Chazal had to try to understand it. And that actually is a comment which we find in the Seder Olam Rabbah, which I also Xerox for you that we'll do a little bit later. The last piece of the puzzle is going to be the motivation behind census. Whenever censuses occur, there's always a reason for them. Even in the United States, there's a reason to try to determine representation. Okay, in this point, it was a period of transition. The walls of Yerushalayim have been completed. The doors, the gates are completed. The defenses are present. And yet, the Jewish people are not in a place where they should feel safe yet. And we'll see that at the beginning because they don't have the people to really defend the city of Yerushalayim. And there's going to be a move that's going to say there need to be people who are going to have to move to repopulate Yerushalayim. Before you try to put across some kind of broad obligation on the people, you need to know how many people are there, so you're able to say, this is how many people we want to have. You also use censuses, we use a census sometimes because it's a point of pride. We want to say how many people are present. Sometimes we use a census to show that we need work on something. We've had in the Chumash, you have a census after a Magefa, you have a census after a plague, you have a census when the Jews first come down to Mitzrayim, you have a census that takes place after the Exodus from Egypt. These censuses make sense of when they're scheduled. They're not just because there's a Bureau of Census that says, oh, if I don't take a census this year, I'm going to get in trouble. Okay, so we're going to do it. We're going to get into the text. The other piece of just last word of introduction, the entire parak I also gave you in another format than you have in your Chumashim. And this is the format, again, of Professor Zer Kavod in the original version of his commentary to Ezra Nechemia from 1948, or 1949, I think it came out. And the reason I gave it to you is even though Professor Zer Kavod is also the editor of the Dat Mikra, and there are some minor changes, most of what he wrote here is contained in the Dat Mikra, but what isn't in the Dat Mikra or in your Tanachim is the way he divides up so it's easier reading. It's referred to in Ivrit as Shichtuv Didakti, didactic rewriting, which doesn't mean anything unless if you know what it means, which basically says like the Koran Sidurim, where they break up sentences into phrases so it's easier to understand. That's the Shichtuv Didakti. What he does is he takes, for instance, here's a list of people, and here are the numbers. There's really no break in the pasuk itself, but the way he lays it out, you can get a better overview. And going through the census, it's sometimes easier to look at it this way than through the regular text. I apologize that I shrunk it, but there's a limit to how many pieces of paper I wanted to pass out. Okay, so let's get started. Yeah.
Getting back to the 24 to 4 and the second that it has 20 acres. Where do we get the 42,360 never net?
It's just a number. It's a
How they
right. Those that is saying everybody, the entire population is 42,360. But where are the different? In other words, where do we find the in the first group the 12,500 people who are missing, and where do we find in the second group the 1,600 who are missing? The answer is we don't know.
But kind of answers the little mystery of how everything would be the same number.
Right. It could be like that as well. It could be that we just maintain the number. It's harder to say, on the one hand, when you're taking a census and you're coming up with numbers like 25,406, you can't say they rounded them off, right? You're saying there's a certain level of precision. But then when you have that precision and all of a sudden the total number is exactly the same as it was 90, 100 years earlier, you start wondering where'd it come from. Now, we don't know, but that's the number that's given. So in other words, we can look backwards and you can say, on one hand, you can say miraculous. On the other hand, you can say, this was the number we gave, just like we talk about 600,000 Jews, which is really just a rounded number. There were 600,000 males of military age who left Mitzrayim and entered into the land of Israel. Okay, it really wasn't exactly 600,000. There was a small change, but it wasn't as big of a change as you might have expected. And we try to explain it. We don't have a good answer for that. This is reporting and not explaining. Okay, let's get started in the parak now. Enough introductions. Pasuk Aleph. Vayehi kasher nivneta choman ve'amida delatot. Now we are now in a place. The walls are finished. The doors of the city are up. In other words, the defenses have been constructed. And at that point, what also happened, there was, they were put in place, the people who are going to be the guardians of the doors, the shoarim, the mishorarim, which is an interesting group of people, the singers, and the Leviim. Now, there is a suggestion here that the group that's actually missing in being assigned some leadership role, which we'll see, are the Kohanim. Dov Zakkai makes a whole piece out of this. Why are the Kohanim not listed here as well? The Mishorarim were the Leviim. The Shoarim, we don't really know for sure who they are, and the Leviim are obviously the Leviim. And part of it is, when we look at earlier documents in previous prakim and in later prakim, there were a lot of Kohanim who had intermarried with the people who were the enemy. And that there may have been a situation, where Nechemia did not want to engage the Kohanim in a defensive role because he may not have been comfortable with them. That's Zakheim's theory about it. Rashi just says, Haleviim, okay, some of them, he just points out it's not all of the Leviim, it's some of the Leviim. The Mitzudat David says, okay, that ultimately these are not the people involved in defenses, but what happened was there were the Shoarim, generic group of people who were responsible for watching the Sha'ar, the gate. There were already people who've been established to work in the Beit HaMikdash as Mishorarim, and there were also the Leviim who were responsible for the treasuries. Then, in addition to it, the Malbim points out, okay, that the Leviim were not just working in the Beit HaMikdash, but the Leviim did have, according to the Malbim, a significant role as well in terms of the building of the walls itself. Okay. Va'atzaved chanani achi, and Nechemia says, and now I have commanded my brother Hanani, we encountered him earlier in Perek Aleph, okay, and ve'et Hananya Sar Habiral Yerushalayim. And also Hananya, and I'm explaining it like most of the Meforsh, classic Meforshim do, the Mitzvot David, etc. And also Hananya, who was responsible for the fortress of Yerushalayim. A birah is a fortress. Remember, nowadays in modern Hebrew, birah is the capital city, but birah really means a fortress. It happens that in the ancient world, the city with the fortress was the capital city, and therefore we've adopted that terminology now. But Hananya was responsible for the birah. Now, the Dat Mikra, that's Professor Zer Kavod, he says, the reality of it is this Vav might not be a Vav, which is normally translated as an and, but it could be a Vav Hamit Pareshet. It's a Vav that explains. Why does he say it? He said, what are the odds that there's a Hanani and a Hananya? And then if you look at the end of the pasuk, Kiu ki'ish emet, he's a person of faith, ve'eret elokim merabim, and he's also a person at this very same time who is a God-fearing person for many years. Merabim is, or the Ralbag says, he is like a distinguished person. Merabim min ha'anashim. In other words, if I look at the beginning of the pasuk, I have two people listed. The end of the pasuk is talking about one person, right? So, according to Professor Zer Kavod, the way you understand this pasuk is, I commanded my brother Hanani. Now, Hanani, he's the Hananya, who's the person over the whole fortress. And the reason why I commanded him, because he's an Ishemet, okay? He was a person who people could trust, okay? He was a person who was a truthful person, and he was also fearful of God. So I commanded him. Whether it's two people or one people, we don't know for sure. But that's what happens. Vayomer lahem lo yipatchu sharei Yerushalayim ad chom hashemesh vad hem omdim yagifu adlatot ve'achozu ve'ameid mishmerot yoshvei Yerushalayim ish mishmero ve'ish negeveto. And I commanded the people who were guarding the shoarim, the defensive forces, I gave them a few pieces of instructions. One, I don't want the doors opened until chom hayom. Chom hayom traditionally means the heat of the day, which is midday. That's what number one. Number two, I want to make sure you have to stand there. Vehem omdim, okay. Ve'ad hem omdim yagifu adlatot ve'achozu. You have to stick there, okay. That as long as these doors are open, you have to be there on guard. Omdim, don't move until the doors get closed. The word yagifu, okay, yiskiru, says the Mitzudat Zion. Okay, now there is, the Malbim once explained that there were actually two sets of doors. And in fact, if you look in Yerushalayim, you ever go through Shar Tzion, okay, it's easy to, Shar Yafo they destroyed. Shar Yafo, they tore down Shar Yafo basically to open up the big thing so cars can get through. There was when Herbert Samuel came, I think is when they broke down that wall to welcome the High Commissioner. But if you think about Shar Tzion, which is a great gate to go through, that's the one right before the old city, right before the Rova. Okay, so you go in, you got a sharp right turn, and that's how you get out. Right now, you go in. There were gates on that door, and then there were gates on the next door. You had double gates always. Every gate in a defensive area always had a right angle and always had two doors. Why? Well, the two doors are double protection, right? Just like a double protection, just like, I don't know if anyone's ever visited the consulate, the embassy, other secure locations, the White House. They let you into one door, you stand for a couple of minutes, then that door closes, then you get into the next door. Same concept in those days. Why a right angle? Why do you have to always turn 90 degrees? Right, so if you come with your chariots, okay, you come with a chariot, you can't go straight through. You got to turn. In order to turn, you got to slow down. Okay, even nowadays, when you drive through Shar Tzion, that is a nerve-wracking turn you have to do with your car. You're grateful they have little cars in Israel. Okay, but it's the same kind of concept. So the Malbim says, what is this talking about? That actually there were the two doors, the inner door and the outer door. The inner door were always closed. The outer doors were going to be open. And that's what this Hem Omdim Yagifu Adalatod V'Achozu V'Amid Mishral Yoshev Shlaim Mishmashol V'Yishneged Beito, that the inner doors were always going to be closed until it was necessary for them to be reopened. Now, the city is built really big. They really built big streets, big boulevards. They have everything, a lot of space in the city. Rachavat Yadayim is a term which we find even nowadays, where it just means it's spacious. But there aren't a lot of people there. In other words, they're missing the population. And there aren't a lot of houses that have been built. Can you imagine? This would have been the time to buy the real estate in Yerushalayim, right? There's a lot of space. There's not enough people. It's a big city. Now, if you don't have enough people, then you have a problem in terms of the defenses. Vayiten Elokai libi, and so God inspired me. Okay, and the inspiration was ve'ekbetza et hachorim, and I gathered the leadership. Chorim is like the free people, v'etaskanim, and the people who were the assistants, the number twos, v'eta'am lehit yaches, and I brought them together to establish people's yichus. Yichus, their genealogies. V'emtza sefer hayachas ha'olim barishona, and to help me in this matter, I found the original Yichus document from the time of Zerubbabel, V'emtza katuv bo, and I saw what was written in it. And this is the introduction now to this census that's going to be taking place. Ultimately, we're going to encounter in Perek Yud Aleph, after census, after all sorts of things are taking place, and he knows how many people are present, he is going to put there's going to be a goral, there's going to be a lottery. 10% of the Jews are going to have to move into Yerushalayim. The only way you can do 10% is if you know how many Jews there are. Yeah. They were living, and we'll see that. In fact, one of the documents I gave you was a map, and we'll see how they're identified in the different places. They are living, you'll see the map in a moment. They are living in Judea. These are all of the cities. If you notice, these are the cities where they're living. It goes all the way to the coastal areas, okay? All the way to the coastal areas and all the way south. But it's primarily, okay, you have Beersheba, a little south of Beersheba. It's primarily in classic, the central area around Yerushalayim, the Harei Yehuda, where most of them are living. So these people are going to be there, but they aren't in Yerushalayim itself. Okay, so now comes the census. And the census, again, is necessary, okay, because we want to make sure that we're going to have two things take place. One is he's presenting it. God inspires him to do this because he needs people in Yerushalayim. We also know that this is going to be a prelude, which is to what is going to happen next regarding intermarriage issues. There was tremendous intermarriage in this time of the people who came back. The intermarriage occurred both with the indigenous tribes who were there, but also primarily with the Samaritans. Remember, Sanballat's the bad guy, but he's been up there. He's the pacha of Shomron. And they've been marrying into Shomron, and they've had this problem all along as well. By knowing people's yichus, you know whether or not, for example, whether or not a Kohen can participate, a Levi can participate, who has rights, who has to send away to foreign wives. Now, this parak, the rest of this parak is the census. I'm going to refer you again to the Zer Kavod document. And if you look at the Zer Kavod, there, it starts out very simply with Pasuk Vav, where we're at. Eila b'nei hamdina ha'olim mishvei ha'gola asher eglanu b'Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel v'yashuvu l'Yerushalayim v'liyuda ish li'iro. These are the people who came back. The b'nei hamdina. These are people who came back, okay, to Medinat Eretz Yisrael. Now, this was, if you remember, this is a region within the broader Persian Empire. The Ibn Ezra says actually Bnei Amidina is referring, these are the people from Bavel who came from their Golah, from their exile, who had been exiled by Nebuchadnezzar, Melech Bavel, and they came to Yerushalayim and to Yehuda. Ish le'iro, people went back to their own cities. They went to their ancestral homes. They repopulated. My house was there. I'm going back there. Okay. Habaim im Zerubbabel, and these were the people who came with Zerubbabel. Yeshua, Nechemia, Zarya, Amaya, Nachamani, Mordechai, Bilshan, Misperet, Bigvai, Nachum, Ba'ana, Misper, Anshe Am Yisrael. Okay, these are the people who came. Now it's interesting, between this time and the time where Zerubbabel actually did the counts, if you remember, we look at differences. If you look in let's see if I can find it right now. I can't find it real quickly. No, it's not. No, I'm not finding it on this list. I apologize. But here, what you actually have is Nechemia here in the list. And Nechemia was number 12. In the list that we had back in Ezra, there were 11, the 12th being Nechemia. There's a debate why Nechemia is included now on the list, possibly because giving him covet. Okay, this is in Nechemia's time. For his name to be missing would be inappropriate. Mordechai, by the way, got demoted a little bit on the list. He's lower down on the list than he had been at the time of Ezra. According to Chazal, the reason why he got demoted is after the story of Purim. The story of Purim, according to Chazal, took place like 13 years earlier. According to Chazal, Mordechai saved the Jews. He should have gone back to the Beis Medrash and gone to learn, and instead he stayed in the king's court. And so he got demoted a little bit by not learning Torah. Okay. Nechemia, by the way, was not learning a lot of Torah at this time either. So, but they were still great leaders. Okay.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Excuse me. Question. Is there significance that there's different names in Ezra and Nechemia?
Not, when there are different names, I'll go back to other times where you have the same report, but with differences. Sometimes there's some things there are not real differences. It's just a variant of the same name. Nachman, those kinds of things. Sometimes there is a distinction. One of the famous pieces, the Ibn Ezra, will discount many of these minor changes. And one of the famous cases he has is in his discussion of the comparison of the two sets of the Aseret HaDibrot. And what he ultimately says is the Aseret HaDibrot of Sefer Shmot, when they were given, and the historical account had been given, those were what actually said on the Aseret HaDibrot. All of the other changes were primarily changes that when Moshe was teaching him his explanation of pieces, and those minor changes, if there's a vav here, a vav, they just forget it. Don't worry about it. Okay. Others will look at every single difference and say, why? What's going on here? Now that's on Chumash. We're now in Ketuvim, which is 2 steps lower in terms of the sanctity, even though it's still sacred books. And in the Ketuvim, you will find Meforshim who will look at it. Many of them will say, we don't know. Okay. And if you just keep on going, and now you look, the first group, and again, it's easier for me, at least, I don't know for you, but it's easier for me to look off of this list. You have B'nai Parash. Okay, you start out with B'nai Parash, right? Then you go ahead, and after B'nai Parash, they tell you there's Alpayim Mea V'Shivim U'Shnayim, 2072, B'nai Shvatya. Okay, again, by the way, Parash we encounter Parash. They were from the tribe of Yehuda. Bnei Shvatya, 372. 372. Bnei Arach, 652. 652. Bnei Pachat Moav. Now you have an interesting thing. The sons of the Pasha of Moab. Now the governor of Moab, what's interesting about the governor of Moab is what the heck is the governor of Moab doing among the Jews? Or why is a Jew the governor of Moab? We don't have a great answer for it, but the Mitzudat David says, well, there was a Jew who was assigned to be the governor over Moab. Okay. Hartum suggests that maybe it was one of his forefathers had once been, and now they're identified. That's the governor's family. Same kind of thing. Okay, Livnei Yeshua, V'Yoav, 2,818. Okay, so you have 2,818, Bnei Elam. You have the next group, the Bnei Elam, 1,254. So you have 1,254, Bnei Zatu, 845. Then Zatu, you have 845. And we keep on going on this list. And when you keep on going on the list, the next group you got is Bnei Zakai, okay, Shvam Ot V'Shishim, 760, Bnei Vinui, Shesh Mot Arba'im U'Shmona, 648, Bnei Bavei, okay, Shesh Mot Esrim U'Shmona, Bnei Azgad, Alpayim Shlosh Mot Esrim U'Shnayim, Bnei Adonikam, Shesh Mot Shishim V'Shiva, Bnei Bigvai, Bnei Idan, Bnei Ater L'Chizkiyah, Tishim U'Shmona, Bnei Ater L'Chizkiyah. So that David says that he may have been from actually an offspring of Chizkiyahu HaMelech, okay, or it was, we're just counting Iter and Chizkiah. We're not really sure. When you look at these numbers, by the way, and just to give you one more piece of structure, the first group of people are all the category of Yisraelim. So if you remember that chart, with the colored chart, we are now all in that first group of people, which was added up to the 25,000 people. Okay, this is that first group of people, and then we keep on going, and it just Bnei Chusham. The next group is Chusham, which has 328. Bnei Vetzai, 324. 324. Bnei Charif, 112. Bnei Givon, people from Givon, 95. Now we go to places. Okay, and if you look at places, this is why I gave you the map. This map, okay, and not to make it too complicated, but if you just want to look, you'll see the people of Anshe Beit Lechem and Atofa. Well, we know where Beit Lechem is. Beit Lechem is south of Yerushalayim, okay, and Atofa is a little north, a tiny bit east of Beit Lechem, 188. Now, when I say Bnei Beit Lechem, that obviously means I've now gone away from families to people who live in areas, which means multiple families. Okay, but this is what they were, Anshe Anatot. Okay, we know Anatot because that was the birthplace of Yirmiyahu Hanavi. And if you look, Anatot's a little north of Yerushalayim, a lot more west. I mean, a lot more east, I'm sorry. Anshe Beit Azmavet. Okay, Azmavet, if you look, is, let's see where we can find, is right above Anatot. Anshe Kiryat Yarim. Okay, with Kiryat Yarim, we know where that is. Kiryat Yarim today, that's Tel Stone. You're driving from the airport back to Yerushalayim, the regular on Road 1. You pass by on the left side, Kiryat Yarim. That's also the place, if you remember, where the Aron was held. Okay, Anshe Harama V'Gava. So Harama, that's basically Ramla. It's north of Yerushalayim. Gava is right there as well. Givon we had already. Anshe Michmas, we know where Michmas is. Okay, it's the same Michmas or close to the same Michmas as today. Michmas is located, and we found it. It's a little north of Geva. Okay, it's spelled with a shin on the map. Anshe Beit El V'Ha'ai, we're still going further north. We remember from the time of Yehoshua and Beit El. Anshe Nevo. Okay, now we're going to find where's Nevo. Anyone find Nevo real quickly? Where is it? Not no. I'm not finding it. If you see it, just give a yell. But if you don't see it, don't give a yell. Bnei Elam. Okay, Elam is, where are we? I was doing very well until then. Hold on. You found Nevo?
Naval could be like right east of Yerushalayim, it's just none of that.
No.
No?
Yeah,
That's
could be.
not-
Let's go.
So,
Yeah.
What did you say?
Bnei Charim. Okay, we found Charim.
Yeah.
You see where you see where Charim is? I don't. Who have not, by the way, those online who have not printed this out, I'll just share the screen so you'll see it so you don't feel lost on this. Here's the map. Okay, I apologize for not doing it earlier. Okay, there is the map, so you can try to follow it with us. Bnei Yericho, well, we know where Yericho is. It's all the way there, closest to the Jordan River. Bnei Lod, now we're going to jump over to where Lod is. It's closer to the Mediterranean. Chadid va'ono, okay, we Kiryat Ono nowadays. Bnei Sna'ah, okay. So then you have, then after Bnei Sna'ah, we finish. Then we go to HaKohanim. If you notice, we're now in Pasuk Lamed Tet, HaKohanim. Right now, we've been talking about people from Yehuda and Binyamin, okay? And now we're talking about the Kohanim. Okay, who are they? Bnei Yedaya, Lebeit Yeshua, Shamot Shivim Shalosh, Bnei Imer, Bnei Pashchur. Maybe you see where they all are. Bnei Charim. Those are the Kohanim. If you remember, the numbers of Kohanim, and just if you look again at that chart, the numbers of Kohanim was pretty good. There's a nice large number of Kohanim, but if you remember, we were short on Leviim. Okay, how Levim? Okay,
Anybody can't be accurate, any group, because they went to cities where they didn't distinguish.
no, because the cities are still within the Israelim, within Yehuda and Binyamin, the non-Kohanim and non-Levim.
Also, they wouldn't be in.
Right. Okay. Okay, remember, we have the 48 cities of the Leviim and the Kohanim, right? So Leviim and Kohanim aren't attached to cities in the same way. Bnei Yeshua lekadmiel livnei lahodava, okay? And Hamishorim bnei Asaph, well, this is the famous bnei Asaph, Mizmor la Asaph, this is the family of Asaph, these great singers. Those were the people, but if you remember, the Leviim, we had almost no Leviim. Can you imagine Duchening in those days? You got 4,000 Kohanim with 74 Leviim. Okay, that line was going to be really long, huh? A lot of, no, you'd have Kohanim would take care of themselves. Kohanim would take care of themselves. Hashoarim, okay, then you have the people, the Meshorim, Bnei Asaph, then you have the Shorim, the people who are Bnei Shalom, Bnei Itar, Bnei Talmon, Bnei Akub, Bnei Chatifa, Bnei Shavi, Mea Shloshim U'Shmona, and these are the people who watched over. They were responsible to watch over the gates of the Beit HaMikdash. That was their job. They were the gatekeepers in the Beit HaMikdash. And then Bnei Shavai, then we have the Netinim. Now the Netinim are people who, if you remember, according to Chazal, were the descendants of Givon. Givon were the people that when Yehoshua first came into the land of Israel, he was supposed to either banish all of the 7 nations or kill them. And the Givonim tricked him. They came, they were dressed up in tattered garments as if they'd come from a long journey. They entered into a peace treaty with him. And because of the peace treaty, he didn't banish them, but he made them responsible for the menial tasks to support the Beit HaMikdash. They were the water carriers, they were the wood bearers, those kinds of things. These are the Netinim. Bnei Tzircha, Bnei Chashupa, Bnei Tabaot, Bnei Keros, Bnei Tzia, Bnei Padom, Bnei Levana, Bnei Chagava, Bnei Shalmai, Bnei Chanan, Bnei Gidel, Bnei Gachar, Bnei Ra'aya, Bnei Ratzin, Bnei Nekoda, Bnei Gazam, Bnei Uzzah, Bnei Paseach, Bnei Vesai. I know it's exciting. Bnei Mu'unim, Bnei Nefishomim, Bnei Bakbuk, Bnei Chakufa, Bnei Charchor, Bnei Batzlit, Bnei Mechida, Bnei Charasha, Bnei Barkos, Bnei Sisra, Bnei Tamach, Bnei Netziach, Bnei Chatifa, and those are, then we have, in addition, Bnei Avdei Shlomo, the servants of Shlomo who weren't Jewish, Bnei Sotei, Bnei Soferet, Bnei Perida, Bnei Ya'ala, Bnei Darkon, Bnei Gidel, Bnei Shvatia, Bnei Chatil, Bnei Porechet, Atzvim, Bnei Amon. Yes.
These were the ones that were supposed to come back to Israel, then these left.
These were attached with the Jewish people, and they came back, and they came back. I think it's an interesting thing, okay? They're called Netinim because, the Bible says, Vayitneim Yehoshua. Yehoshua gave them this job, okay? No, they couldn't, okay? But they were attached to the Jewish people. They were close to the Jewish people. And the same thing you had with the Avdei Shlomo. The Avdei Shlomo, he talks about, this comes from Malachim Aleph in Perek Tet, it talks about that Shlomo took the leftover people from the Canaanim who were still there, and he made them into a nation of slaves. These were the Avdei Shlomo. Now, these people are not Jewish, but they were attached to the Jewish people. Yeah. So it's interesting. It may just be not the Sisra. It may not be. Not be these Sisra, right? Then you have, okay, it says, Kol HaNetinim U'Bnei Avdei Shlomo Shloshmot Tishim U'Shnayim. Now, it's not a massive number, right? The total number of these people who were attached are 392 people. Okay, they were very loyal to the Jewish people. Now, we also have after that people who don't have yichus. Now, what does it mean not to have yichus? It doesn't mean that your father was a shoemaker. Not having yichus means they can't say for sure who they are. Are they Kohanim? Are they Leviim? Are they from this tribe or that tribe? We have it very often nowadays with Kohanim. Okay, we have people in our community. The last name is Cohn, but they don't get a Kohen Aliyah. Now, sometimes it's because they change somewhere along the line. They may have changed a name to change a visa, to switch a visa with somebody back in Europe to get to the United States. They may have changed their name. Sometimes it was just the guy from Ellis Island couldn't hear what they said, so he said, "You look like a Kohen." Okay, but there are a lot of Kohanim who weren't from, and they became Balei Tshuva, and their name is Cohen, and they think they were Kohanim, but there isn't the Masoret. Sometimes they can do checks. I just was dealing with a family of Leviim, and they just celebrated an anniversary when they got a decision from Rabbi Schwartz that they really were Leviim. And it was based on genealogical records and cemeteries, and and the icons on tombstones, for example, for Kohanim. One of the classic icons has the hand from Duchening, and if you see the hands from Duchening as a symbol, you normally would know that that's a Kohen, even though and especially if it says HaKohen on the text itself. If you go far enough back, sometimes that can be a basis. But here were people without that kind of yichus. We really weren't sure who they were or what they were. And they came back nevertheless. And so there are in this people, the tel melech, tel charsha, karu, vadon, v'imer, v'lo yachlu lagid beit avotam zaram, im Yisrael. They couldn't even say if they were Jewish. They just didn't know. Now, these are places, interestingly, these mitel melech, tel charsha, etc. These are places in Eretz Yisrael. According to the Ralbag, these are people who lived in places in Bavel. According to the Malbim, which is based on a position of Chazal, these were abandoned children, what I refer to as shtuki and a sufi. A shtuki may be a mamzer. Okay, you know who the mother is, you just don't know who the father is. A sufi is you don't know who the parents are at all. It's an abandoned child and you don't know who they are. Now, in those kinds of cases, we don't know who they are, but they had identified as Jews. B'nai Dilaya, B'nai Tovia, B'nai Nekoda, 642. Okay, so there were 642 of them. Umina Kohanim. Now comes a group of Kohanim that didn't have yichus. B'nai Chavaya, B'nai Hakotz, B'nai Barzilai, Asher Lakach Mibnot Barzilai Giladi Yishali Vayikarei al Shmam. Okay, this was from they were taken from the daughters of Barzilai. Ela Bikshu, and I can't read this. Ela Bikshu Kitavam Hamit Yachasim Velo Nimtza. They looked for their yichus documents. Vayigoalu min hakuna, and they were excluded. Vayigoalu, Rashi says they were defiled. Migualim. Okay, also similar with the word with an ayin, we purged. The Malbim says they went ahead and they were no longer eligible for kuna. They had married women they weren't allowed to marry, like a divorcee in those kind of cases, and that's why they were excluded. Just one quick side note and a story. When I first became rabbi at Kins, one of the old-time Kins people wanted to meet with me. And the reason she wanted to meet with me is she brought with her Sefer Yuchsin. She had a chart that showed her family going back to Rashi. Okay, this to this to this to this to this. She was very proud of it. It was a chart that was hanging on her wall that she had inherited, and she wanted to make sure that I knew the yichus. Okay, that she had the yichus. Now, she didn't toss around her yichus, but the idea of having a Sefer Yuchsin, of being able to trace your family back and know who you were, it in the times of the Beit HaMikdash was massive. especially with Kohanim and Leviim. The rest of us, we were Jews. Now, that's one of the tasks we say Mashiach is going to have to be involved in, being able to establish who has that kind of yichus that we can rely on. Ultimately, they couldn't come up. Vayomer hitarshata. And so hitarshata. Now hitarshata, according to Rashi, this is Nechemia says. The reason he's called hitarshata is because he was the one, if you remember, that we said this back in Ezra, he was the one who was permitted because of his role to drink wine in the king's palace. And so he had the heter there. Okay. However, okay, and this was his job. Im lo yochlu mikodesh hakodashim ad amod hakohen l'urim v'tumim. Okay, he says, listen, we don't know if you're Kohanim for sure, and because we don't know if you're Kohanim for sure, therefore you can't eat from the Kodesh hakodashim, from the most sacred of the meats, the chataot and the ashamot, like other kohanim. But when it comes to truma, that is only derabanan, he allowed them to eat that, which may have been a brilliant move. Okay, politically, not only was halachically very, very courageous to take this kind of move. We're not sure you're a kohen. You can have the truma derabanan, you can have. But it's also very courageous. It's also very politically astute because he keeps them connected. I can't let you do everything as a Kohen. I'll let you do some things though. And the reason why you could do the Rabbanan, because if it's rabbinic in nature, there's some room to be more lenient. Kol hakahal ka'achad, arba ribo alpayim shalosh ma'ot v'shishi. And this is where you have that number of 42,360. That's the totality. The problem again is when you try to add it up, it doesn't come. Now, and Rashi says that the others were Jews who came from the other Shvatim. Okay, because when we were counting, we're counting Yehuda and Binyamin. We weren't counting the others. This is based on a statement of the Seder Olam Rabbah. And in the Seder Olam Rabbah, and this is again one of the sheets that I handed out, it's this one. Okay, and if you look on the Seder Olam Rabbah, and for those who are online, here is the Seder Olam Rabbah, and there's a big arrow I drew. Arba ribo bichlal ufrat enan elelamed elef v'gimel me'ot v'shishim. Okay, it says, listen, the big round number was 40,000. It was about 40,000 people who came back. But when you count them up, there's only 30-some thousand, right? It doesn't work. V'yud bet elef heichanim. So where's the 12,000 missing people? Ella elu shalu mishar hashvatim. Okay, these were, however, the people who came from other tribes. And since they came from other tribes, this count was a count that was meant to be for Yehuda and Binyamin. So we didn't include them. So there's another 12,000 there, and that's how it all works out. The Dat Mikram suggests that maybe these other 12,000, okay, may have been other people who had come back at a different time. Okay, maybe it's a different, maybe it's from an earlier time. And if you remember, back in Sefer Ezra, we also talked about Shesh Batzar. Okay, Shesh Batzar, he went up with 12,350 people. It may be the people from Shesh Batzar, Zerubbabel's Aliyah. There's a number of different possibilities on it, but we know the number doesn't work, and we aren't sure. And Chazal tried to respond to it, but again, as is true in many cases, because there's no absolute halachic imperative that's tied into this. At a certain point, Chazal left it as an open debate. The only time you have to have resolution if there's a halachic implication. What's interesting is, obviously, this is when you have these differences. For people who are trying to look at text and trying to suggest that it's not a sacred text, these are the kind of things you jump on. Look, there's mistakes. We say, we're happy to have things we don't understand. We can live with those things.
Is the number that came back similar to the number that was?
No, it was a very small percentage of Jews who came back. Many, many more who stayed in Galut, as we have found in almost every case except for Mitzrayim. Okay, and even then, if you remember, it was only 20% of the Jews who left Mitzrayim. The other, according to Chazal, the other, the Chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim, the other 80% died during Makat Choshech. We Jews are very good in the diaspora. We're not really good on the return part.
So the exile would have been like 100,000 or 100,000.
The exile was many, many times more. Yeah, many, many times more. Now, just to finish off the parak, and I know it's been exciting, we're getting this milvad. Now, beyond this, by the way, milvad avdehem v'amotehem ela shivat alafim 337. In addition, there were servants and there were maid servants. Or another 7,337 vilahem mishorim and mishorot 245. And there were also, in addition, the singers, the male and the female singers who were involved. Interestingly, there are some people who want to pick up on this right away. Oh, Kol Isha must be mutter, okay, because there's women who are singing. Okay. Now it is okay. The Mishorim and Mishorot, Rashi says, when they were coming back from Bavel, it was a parade and everybody was singing. Okay, the whatever. Okay, good. Gemalim arbameot shloshim v'chamisha. There were also camels. Let's not forget 435 camels. Chamarim sheshet alafim shvamaot v'esrim 6,720 donkeys. Umitzat Roshavot natnu lemlacha hitarshata natan laotzar zahav dar komonin 1,000 mizrakot 50 kotnot kohanim 30 v'chameshmot. And also, in addition to all of that, you have, the contributions that were brought. Hitarshata gave to the treasury. He gave 1,000 drachmas of gold, and he gave a drachma is about. This would be a drachma is, they're not really sure, somewhere between 4.3 to 8.6 grams. So it's about 560 kilo of gold, which is about 1,100 pounds of gold he gave as well. And in addition to it, he brought the clothing for Kohanim, 350. And the leadership gave another 20,000 ribo of gold. Okay, he only gave 1,000. This is 20,000. Shtei ribo v'chesef manim alpayim, and he also gave a lot of silver v'ketanot kohanim shisha v'shivim, and also clothing for the kohanim as well. Vayeshvu kohanim v'alevim v'ashorim v'amishorim min ha'am v'anetinim v'chol Yisrael ba'arehem. This is really the punchline here. The punchline here is, where did these people go? They went back to their ancestral homes. They didn't go to Yerushalayim. Vayigah hachodesh hashvi'i uvnei Yisrael ba'arehem. And we get to the 7th month, and the Jews are not in Yerushalayim. And because they're not in Yerushalayim, Nechemia has this crisis. It's a security crisis. He has to figure out how to populate that area. And without populating the area, he's going to have a problem. Now, just imagine for a moment, we're in modern times. Imagine for a moment all of the efforts the state of Israel did to have people move into the Galil and into the Negev. The Galil still needs more Jewish presence because it's very heavy Arab presence. Okay, the Negev still needs more Jewish presence. Everybody wants to live, in Rechavia, and that's really nice. I don't know if you want to live in Rechavia anymore, but everyone wants to live, within walking distance of the Kotel. That's really wonderful. But if we don't populate all of the land of Israel, we'll lose the land of Israel. That also, even going back to 1948, you remember the Migdal and Chomam attempts, where they would establish before the final declaration of boundaries, where they would go against the British in the middle of the night. They would establish a watchtower. They would put up a gate, fence, and all of a sudden they had a settlement. And if they were able to get away with it, they were able to establish facts on the ground, which still are being done today. These facts on the ground, unfortunately, though, that happened there, they went to the comfortable places. They went back to where they know, and they didn't go to where Nechemia is going to need them, which is going to be in Yerushalayim, which is going to be the center of all the activity. We have a lot more work to do on what Ezra and Nechemia are going to do. We're going to have this next parak is going to be the gathering, which is going to be we're going to encounter Ezra once again, and we'll continue from there. Everyone, we will see you. We're right at 10 o'clock. We'll see everybody next week, same time, same place. I will put in one commercial. There are going to be a number of new shiurim that are starting up. There are shiurim on Tuesday night. There's going to be a Navi shiur with Rabbi Goldstein from the Kollel that's taking place here. It's going to be online and it's also going to be in person. I encourage everyone to do the in person. It's much more meaningful. There are also for men, there's a number of new shiurim as well. The women's shiur, by the way, on Shabbos afternoon is moved back to 4 o'clock. So please don't forget about that. The Novi shiur of Nechemia, the Nach shiur Nechemia is the most popular of all. And don't forget about coming here. And we'll end off on that note. I'll see everybody next week. Bye-bye.